Good evening. This is Mayor John Byrne, and welcome to our May 19th, 2020 regular town board meeting. I have called on Commissioner Jason Wunsch to lead us in our invocation, and Commissioner Marilyn Gardner to lead us in our pledge. All stand.
Thank you so much for this night. Thank you for the opportunity to have this meeting, to live in the United States of America, and to have this freedom. Father, just be with our community tonight as we struggle through, just to get through this virus. And thank you for the wonderful job that the town has done in dealing with this. Lord, thank you for everyone that has come together to just make this a smooth time and during a very difficult and challenging time, Lord. Lord, we just ask that you be with us tonight in this meeting and help us to make decisions in the best interest of the public. Thank you. We love you. In your name we pray. Amen.
Please face the flag. Prepare to make the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, I'll ask our town manager, Adam Mitchell, to review the protocol for the public participation as it relates to this virtual meeting. Adam?
Thank you, Mayor. All attendees tonight have joined the meeting as muted. There is not a public hearing this evening, so the only time to address the board is during the public comment section at the beginning of the meeting. If anyone from the public wishes to address the board during the public comment section, they will need to notify the town host that they wish to speak. So for the public's benefit, if you are joining the meeting online and wish to speak, please press the raise hand button in the Zoom app. If you're joining the meeting via telephone, please press *9 to raise your hand. After you've raised your hand, you will enter into a queue. When the public comment period begins, Mayor Byrne will ask the town host to recognize you to speak by calling out your name or the last 4 digits of your phone number. You will be unmuted at this time and allowed to speak. When we ask that you begin your comments by stating your name and address for the public record. The public is asked to keep all comments to 3 minutes so that all can be heard in a timely manner. Once you've finished addressing the town board, you will be muted for the remainder of the meeting. And that is the protocol this evening, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Adam. We move to item 3A, approval of the minutes from the May 4th, 2020 regular scheduled town board meeting.
Mayor, make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Presentation, interbasin transfer, scoping study. More information about this agenda item will be presented by Town Manager Mitchell.
Thank you, Mayor. And in a moment, I'm going to turn it over to Public Utilities Director Jay Myers to make a brief presentation to the town board on this matter. But the purpose of this agenda item is to present results of the interbasin transfer scoping study. A copy of that study was and technical memorandum was prepared by water management consultants Hayes and Sawyer, and it was provided to you in your agenda materials. Again, Jay will be making a presentation tonight to provide an executive summary of the scoping process to determine the efforts that were required to move forward with obtaining an interbasin transfer certificate for the town's future water supply. At this time, I'd like to ask Jay to make the presentation. There is no action required. This is for information purposes only. Jay?
Thank you and good evening. In January of this year, we began the scoping process for an interbasin transfer when we started discussion of buying water from the city of Sanford. Next slide, please, Scott. So what is an interbasin transfer? An interbasin transfer is defined as a regulated movement of surface water from one river basin to another. You can transfer up to 2 million gallons a day on an average day or 3 million gallons on a peak day without an IBT certificate. Currently, the city or the town of Fuquay-Varina, we are transferring just under 1 million gallons a day from the Cape Fear Basin into the Neuse River Basin. The law does not prohibit transfers, but requires that effects of the transfer on the source and receiving basins be quantified prior to the transfer. Regulated under North Carolina General Statutes, Chapter 143, Section 215, paragraphs 22G and 22L, and the Environmental Management Commission is the IBT approval authority. The State Environmental Policy Act, SEPA, is used as the mechanism for presenting the project to regulatory agencies and stakeholders per General Statutes 215, paragraph 22L. The weight of evidence required to support the necessity, reasonableness, and benefits of a requested transfer surpass SEPA requirements. Basically, this is saying that in order to get the final determination from the EMC that the benefits of the proposed transfer outweigh the detriments of the proposed transfer, the detriments have been or will be mitigated to the maximum degree practicable, and there are no reasonable alternatives to the proposed transfer. Next slide, please, Scott. This map shows the interbasin transfer project area. At the city of Sanford has a water treatment plant located on the Cape Fear River near NC 42, also upstream of the Buckhorn Dam. The current plan is to increase the treatment capacity of that plant, and the town receive 6.5 million gallons a day of treatment capacity and water that will be sent to the town of Fuquay-Varina via a large diameter water line along NC 42. Next slide, please, Scott. In February of 2020, Hazen and Sawyer staff and Fuquay-Varina town staff met with the Division of Water Resources as a scoping meeting for what will be required for the request for an interbasin transfer certificate. We learned that an environmental impact statement is going to be required, that we will have to demonstrate water conservation to minimize the proposed transfer. We'll have to prepare technically defensible alternatives analysis, and we'll have to prepare a hydraulic modeling via OASIS. OASIS is a river modeling software program that takes historical meteorological data to look at how much water is going to be available, along with all the withdrawals and discharges into the river basin, both present and future. And one thing that we're also going to have to address is climate change impacts. If climate change temperatures increase, they could increase the amount of evaporation in reservoirs like Lake Jordan, which will decrease the amount of water that's available. So we'll have to look at that as well. One thing we do not have to do is evaluate water quality impacts in the Cape Fear River, since we are not proposing any new discharges. This could change over the course of the study if Harnett County decided that we were going to expand their wastewater treatment plant. We may have to account for it then. And then the city of Sanford's wastewater treatment plant project would be considered a separate permitting effort by the city of Sanford and not included in our study. Next slide, please, Scott. So some of the key tasks that came out of the meeting with Division of Water Resources is our first step is preparing a letter of notice of intent. Basically, we're notifying the public of our intent to seek an interbasin transfer certificate. We have to notify the public in a certain area, and we have to hold meetings to obtain comments to include as part of our scope for our analysis. We also have to study our water demand, both present and future. Since we are both in the Cape Fear and in the Neuse River Basin, we look at a water balance. Where's the water going once we receive it? How much is going back into the Neuse River? How much is going back into Cape Fear? We also have to prepare an alternatives analysis. Some of this work has already been done where we've met with different suppliers. We've also looked at the possibility of our own water treatment plant. One thing that we'll probably have to add in is what if we took our discharge from the Terrible Creek plant and discharged it back into the Cape Fear River. And then we also have to do an environmental analysis where we're looking at impacts to wildlife, to water quality, noise, air pollution, basically cumulative and secondary impacts as we continue to grow because of this additional water. And then we'll also have to look at mitigation to those impacts through water conservation. Some of our stormwater impacts are already mitigated through our MPDS Phase 2 permit. And then we present a draft to the draft final environmental impact statement to EMC. We also hold additional public hearings to receive comments on the impact statement. We seek a record of decision from EMC, and then we submit an interbasin transfer petition, which has to go through an administrative and judicial review before we get a finding of fact and a final certificate. Next slide, please, Scott. So the first step is a public notification. General Statutes, Chapter 143, Section 215, Paragraph 22L requires the applicant to hold initial public meetings for the scoping. And we'll look at that a little bit more in the next slide. When we get to the draft environmental impact statement, then the North Carolina Division of Environment and Quality is responsible for subsequent public hearings. Right now, Hazen is developing a database for the public notification. You'll see a list on the next slide of who all we have to notify. And then the notification area could be revised or extended in response to previous litigation issues. And the town is responsible for holding 3 public meetings within 90 days after the issuance of the letter of intent. One meeting has to be held in the source river upstream of the withdrawal. One has to be held within the source river basin downstream of the withdrawal. And then one meeting has to be held within the receiving basin. Next slide, please, Scott. So in the area in green is where we have to notify everybody of our intent to have a interbasin transfer certificate. We have to notify the newspapers of general circulation within the counties and the cities and towns. We also have to notify the governmental bodies of both counties and cities within that area. We have to also put it in North Carolina register. We have to notify public water supply systems and water management agencies, MPDS permit holders, which are the wastewater treatment plants that are over 100,000 gallons a day, any interbasin transfer certificate holders, and registered with water withdrawals, and any person that is any interested person, such people that may be on a listserv that like a River Watch type thing. Next slide, please, Scott. So the preliminary interbasin transfer schedule is we're shooting to have the notification letter of intent out in July of this year. Then we'll have our 3 public meetings within 90 days. Get comments back within 30 days after that. So then we begin our environmental statement, impact statement development that will run 7 months. Then we meet with EMC to present our draft EI environmental impact statement. hopefully we get some kind of feedback from them. We go back and revise some more. Then we submit the IBT petition and then get a final determination from the EMC. Then it goes through the administrative and judicial review so that we hopefully have a final interbasin transfer certificate by the summer of 2023. And we've already begun the process of the database development for notification. The cost of the interbasin transfer certificate, preparing and doing all this, is projected to be about $1.1 million. We have already started the process, and we've budgeted an additional $1 million in next year's budget to cover this effort. And that's the end of the presentation. I'll take any questions.
So, Mayor, maybe before questions, I would just recap for the town board. Again, this is a lengthy process. Jay mentioned a little over $1 million to obtain an interbasin transfer certificate. There's a lot of detail and close scrutiny and study that needs to be done with this to satisfy the requirements of North Carolina general statutes and really satisfy the public interest that our interbasin transfer does not have a environmental impact. And so the schedule, again, assumes that we're starting this work now in earnest and complete it by the end of the 23 calendar year. You do all of this before you can begin the process of construction to achieve what we're trying to achieve here, which is to partner with the city of Sanford in expanding their existing water treatment plant to where the town would be an owner of 6.5 million gallons per day of capacity for our water system and for our customers, both present and future. And so this is the first step in the first lengthy step in the process to move us along with our goals of expanding our water capacity for the town.
And I think that's a key point, that we would be an owner in this system. Actually, I believe we'd be getting more water from the system than the city of Sanford would.
From the expansion, that's correct.
From the expansion. And this is a big deal for Fuquay-Varina's future. We've studied this for several years now.
We have.
And Jay's done an outstanding job getting us to this point. And
he has.
Sanford's very excited about this too.
That's right. You and I have met with their mayor and manager and have begun those conversations. This will eventually result in an interlocal agreement that the parties will have to enter into and execute. And the mayor and I have already begun having conversations with the mayor of Sanford and the city manager of Sanford to talk about some of those terms.
Do we have any other questions that we can ask Jay at this time, or Adam?
Jay, just a couple of questions. Are you able to speak to the cost and how does this compare? Is this a standard cost based on the amount of transfer, or is this something unique for this particular project?
The interbasin transfer certificate and the preparation of environmental impact statement. This is right in line with the cost. This is pretty much what we projected from the beginning. There's quite a bit of effort preparing one of these environmental impact statements, and not only the initial one, but going back and addressing all the comments you receive from when you send it out to all the interested parties, to all the, you send it out to a clearinghouse at the Department of Environmental Quality. They send it out to all their different divisions, and they all bring back comments. No, this is right in line with what we expected.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, we'll move on then.
That's right. This was just for information purposes for the board to keep you updated on our process.
Okay, we'll move to 5A. At this time, the IT director Scott will call on individuals that have virtually raised their hand by way of the Zoom app or by telephone. Those wishing to address the town board will be unmuted one at a time. As a reminder, the public comment is for those wishing to speak on matters that are not subject to a public hearing. Those speaking are asked to begin by stating their name and address for the public record. And please limit your comments to 3 minutes in order that all who wish to speak can be heard in a timely manner. Scott, do we have anybody signed up?
Yes, sir. We have one person, Beth Bordeaux. You're now able to speak.
Beth, come right on.
Beth, please unmute your mic. Beth Bordeaux, there you go.
Okay, I'm sorry, I wasn't unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Hear you fine. You go right ahead.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. I'm Beth Bordeaux. I'm the Executive Director of Western Wake Crisis Ministry, and I live at 1044 Branch Line Lane in Apex. I want to thank you all, and I appreciate this opportunity. Western Wake Crisis Ministry has a 36-year history of supporting our neighbors with a mission to create a healthy, hunger-free, housing-stable community across the western and southwestern region of Wake County. Our service area includes Fuquay-Varina, Holly Springs, Willow Springs, Apex, New Hill, Friendship, and all the surrounding rural areas. While our facility sits in Apex, our board has adopted a resolution that everyone throughout this service area that needs our services should have equal access to that support, and we are actively living into that value. Our current service in the Fuquay-Varina and Willow Springs area are based on a collaboration with FACES, which is an organization that sits there in Fuquay and works collectively with a number of Fuquay congregations. Our volunteers and our staff work closely with Harriet Wilson and her volunteers to ensure that families maintain housing and keep their utilities on during times of crisis. I'm speaking today to urge you to support our proposal for the town of Fuquay to join with neighboring municipalities of Holly Springs and Apex in supporting the Family Recovery Fund. In speaking with the town manager last week, I believe that you all have received this proposal. We're seeking $10,000 from the town of Fuquay-Varina to match the $10,000 received from Holly Springs and the $20,000 already received from Apex. In addition, we've started a community-wide campaign with targeted fundraising goal of $150,000 to support families in recovery because we know that the impact of COVID-19 will be great. These funds will allow us to engage in a stronger partnership and support in the community of Fuquay. This stronger engagement would include, in addition to increased direct financial assistance, it will include a stronger engagement in all of Western Wake Crisis Ministry services, such as our social work supports and case management for families that have complex issues, maybe facing homelessness or have vulnerable persons in the household. Impact coaching, where we have volunteers that have been through hours of professional coach training so that they can work one-on-one with clients to make a plan to move towards stability and sustainability. And direct financial assistance that goes beyond just paying the rent or paying the utility, but also can include things like childcare or the help with a car repair so that someone can continue working. Harriet and I have already been in conversation, and we plan to work together to ensure that these funds are spent on citizens from the Fuquay-Varina area and to be able to track that data so that you can have a report on it. I appreciate again your time for having me and for allowing me to speak this evening.
Thank you so much for participating and bringing the public comment. Scott, you have anybody else?
No, sir.
Okay, at this time we'll close our public comment period, and we'll move on to item 8, the consent agenda. What is the board's pleasure on the items on the consent agenda?
Mayor, make a motion to approve consent agenda items A, B, C, D.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. There are no administrative reports for the May 19th Town Board meeting. We'll move to other business. The manager's report. Adam?
Thank you, Mayor. I do have a few items I want to just update the board on related to our departments and just some various other projects that we've got going on here since our last town board meeting. First of all, our finance department is preparing for our budget public hearing, which is scheduled for our next meeting, June 1st. And they're continuing to monitor revenues as it relates to impacts involving COVID-19. And our finance department is working with other department directors on year-end closeouts for their various departments. Our public works department is continuing to provide services to the community, and we are educating the public on the elimination of bags from the yard debris stream effective July 1. I had emailed the board about this some time ago, and we've begun implementing a strategy of discussion with the public about this through our focus newsletters. The town will no longer be accepting bagged yard debris as of July 1 due to our yard debris disposal facility no longer accepting them. No other yard debris disposal facilities in the area will accept bagged yard debris either due to contamination in the compost waste stream. So unfortunately, this option of being able to do this is no longer available to us or anyone else in the area that takes their yard debris to a disposal facility. So therefore, residents may place all loose debris in a plastic tote or trash can that's smaller than 20 gallons and less than 40 pounds, or in multiple containers, or just not bag them, and we'll continue to pick up yard debris. And so
Adam, I've heard of places where they let you bag it, but they had to be clear bags.
No, sir, not anymore.
No more.
No disposal areas in this region will accept bagged yard debris.
Okay. Primarily, the reason is contamination.
Exactly.
Or products that should not be
Both.
in the waste stream.
Both. That's correct.
What alternatives are we offering citizens to that waste that they can't get rid of? In other words, I don't want them flushing it down the toilets or anything like that.
No, this was strictly related to yard debris, right? And so, again, we just can't have bags, plastic bags in the yard debris pickup. And so, any yard debris or any debris from your yard just needs to be either loose, or you can put it in a plastic tote that we can empty into our truck as we take it to, before we take it to the disposal facility. But that it needs to be manageable for our work crew. It needs to be less than a 20 gallon or less tote, and it needs to be less than 40 pounds so that they can lift it and dump it into the truck, put it back, and move on to the next home.
It's not something that they would have to truly lift it and put it in the truck. It's not like a container that would, like a garbage truck or recycle.
That's right. It's not something that we can put on the back of a machine and have it dump into the truck. It's something that they would physically have to lift. That's right.
Okay.
So I just wanted to remind the board that we are in the education process on that, and that will begin July 1. Our Parks and Recreation and Art Center, our Community Center Art Center, are working on a reopening plan for both of those facilities, the Community Center and the Art Center, and are planning for summer programming and classes that will be within state guidelines. And so there may be limits on the number of participants we can allow in a summer program or summer class. We'll certainly have to accommodate for social distancing. There may be guidelines as it relates to wearing protective equipment, protective personal equipment like masks or gloves, but we are trying to provide and have a plan for providing some opportunities for our community moving forward into the summer months where it's safe and where we're able to do that. And so Jonathan and Maureen continue to make plans and prepare for that, and we'll hopefully have some announcements on that, on summer programming and classes within the next coming weeks. We are waiting to hear what Governor Cooper and the state have to say about Phase 2 guidelines. Our IT department is preparing for the return of more staff at Town Hall. We had some staff return to Town Hall this week, and we'll have more in the coming weeks, I imagine, as well. We'll continue to have some teleworking, though, as well, because it makes sense for that to continue just to keep numbers dispersed within our facilities. They are also working closely with our police department on our upcoming police department move and continuing to support remote meetings along with other planned projects that are in the queue. Our planning department continues to review plans and hold virtual pre-development meetings. They're preparing a grant application at the moment as well to NCDOT for the pedestrian planning grant that will update our 2012 pedestrian master plan. We'll be seeking some grant funds both through NCDOT and through CAMPO for that project. Our engineering department has reported that Norfolk Southern officials have been in contact with the town, and they're about to start their portion of the Northwest Judd Parkway project. They expect to have their crews mobilized in the next several months to begin their portion of the project. This is a big advancement and step forward in our project. Our Public Utilities Department, the paving on the water line replacement project in downtown is complete, and that project is complete. That is another milestone for the town. And design work has already commenced on fiscal year 21 water line replacements. This will include a large diameter lines being replaced along a portion of Academy Street and Main Street for future expected high-density development.
The one in downtown was a huge project, and it's been one that we've been looking forward to probably for the last 4 to 5 years, and really glad to see us get this one in our rearview mirror.
Yes, sir. I agree. I mentioned earlier about our police station. Our police station is nearing the end of renovation. It's getting to be very close. It may even be where we can plan for and stage a tour with our town board members. We are still, as you would imagine, wearing personal protective equipment when we're going in there. There are still workers in the building, and so we want to make sure that we respect their public safety as well as ours. But it would be something that would be nice for the town board to see. So we'll try to get those tours arranged so you can see the building just before the police department moves in, so you can kind of get a good idea of how that is arranged and set up. We did this week on Monday, yesterday, have a reopening to limited capacity at Town Hall for the public. For the purposes of utility payments and establishing utility service, payments for building permits, as well as planning document submittals. I can say I'm very pleased about this, to be honest with you, that we've had very little traffic since we opened it. We have been encouraging the public, even though we're open, if they need to physically come in and do business, we're here for them. However, there's still a stay-at-home order in place. There are still guidelines to only be out doing what is absolutely necessary to do, and we've been functioning just fine in the last 45 to 60 days with people being able to pay their bills either online or in the drop box out back. And so if they don't have to step foot in the building, we're sort of encouraging them not to, and I think the public has heard that and are being respectful of that. But we are set up. You probably saw if you went in the lobby, came in through the lobby-way, we've got decals on the ground that indicate staying apart 6 feet from the person beside you or in front of you. We've got tables set up so there's some distance between our staff and the public. We've got some sneeze guards up that we've put, but we're going to have more permanent ones installed. We're waiting for the materials to come in this week, and so as things ramp up, that'll be looking a little bit more professional as well. We just did what we needed to do to go ahead and try to get some activity back in the town hall. But the reopening plan has gone well. I want to just thank our customer service staff and our inspection staff that provide customer service, that are operating the windows. They've been trained to ask the screening questions that are on the front door, ask individuals who step in the building, have you read the screening questions? Do you answer yes or no to those questions so that we can gauge if it's appropriate for you to be in the building? They are making sure that the public who's coming into the building are wearing masks for both their protection and the protection of our employees. And so our staff has done a good job to prepare for what sounds strange, but a reopening and invitation for the public to come in to the Publix building, which is a little bit of a strange thing to say, but it is the reality we live in at the moment. Again, I mentioned we're waiting to hear what the governor's plans are for phase 2 and what restrictions or modifications may be in place. That'll give us some guidance as to how we address our business here and how we address the opening of future town facilities and how we perhaps even address future public meetings and how the public can physically be a part of that process. And so we're waiting for that guidance from Governor Cooper and the state. Just some other things I want to make you aware of. I mentioned sort of briefly at our last meeting that we do have some plans. Susan's leading the effort with our communications department so that the town can have sort of its own special way of congratulating the graduates here in Fuquay-Varina. And that announcement, I'll be making you aware of that, and that announcement will be coming in the next week or two. It will be before their graduation date, but we're not going to do it too soon because we want it to be kind of close to when their graduation date would be. I did attend a Wake County Municipal Managers virtual meeting last week. There we talked about proposed budgets from the various municipalities. I think it's interesting. You've got about a little less than half that are not as dynamically growing like we are in Fuquay-Varina, that are maybe taking a more conservative approach, and then you've got a little bit more than half like us that have developed budgets that are also conservative in terms of spending and holding back on expenditures until we truly understand the impacts, but are preparing and planning for continuing to invest in the community and in the growth of the community. And so there's a lot of similarities. When I was sitting there listening to other managers talk about their budgets, it sounded like they had a camera and were spying on me and my staff when we were developing our town budget. There were a lot of similarities in many of the municipalities here in Wake County. While I felt very confident about my budget recommendation to you anyway, that certainly gave some added assurances that we're on the right track, I believe, with our budget plan. Last two things I just want to mention, three things really, before hitting on a couple of other items that are already on the agenda listed. I did participate with Chief Malden and Wake County officials and Garner officials in discussions, furthering our discussions that have been going on for the better part of a year now about a co-location fire station north of or in the vicinity of the 1010 Road 401 area, kind of near the area of where 540 is going to be coming in. We do not have a need today for a fire station or physical presence there as greatly as Garner does, but we would likely have a need in the future. And we don't want to do necessarily is close any opportunities for us for a co-located station if that makes the most sense in the future. And so we did have some conversations about what a potential partnership would look like. And we're still in the very preliminary stages of that and truly trying to assess whether that is something that the chief and I even want to recommend that we do. But I do want to just make you aware that we are having those conversations and they continue to go forward as Garner and Wake County are getting closer to deciding if Garner needs a fire station at that location. Their need is much more advanced. Our need is with fire station number 4. And as you saw in the 5-year plan presentation I made to you, potentially even a fire station number 5 on the southern end of our community where we're experiencing a great deal of growth and development. But that's not to say that 540 won't be a game changer and we won't need a physical presence there. Right now, fire station number 2 is the closest to that 1010 intersection. We're about 4 miles away. And so a physical presence there would certainly perhaps enhance our response time as things develop in that area related to 540. I'll continue to keep you updated as we continue to have conversations and discussions about that subject matter. Some of you might have seen, if you've been down to the Fuquay Mineral Spring Park, the bridge has been reinstalled, the new bridge. I think Scott's got a picture to put up on the screen for you. Is it up on your screen? Can you see this? Good. And so our new bridge has been installed. It's not done yet. Some of the concrete and brick paver work has been completed, but there's still some transitional work that needs to be done. But the bridge looks very attractive. They will tie the gabion baskets into the cornerstones of the bridge, and hopefully the project will be completed in the coming weeks. I think this is going to provide a long-term solution for the town. Certainly from a maintenance standpoint, it's going to be very helpful to us because of the materials it's made of, and I think it's very attractive and certainly adds to the character of the park. So very pleased with the turnout of that bridge, but I wanted just to provide you an update.
The concrete work and the brick stamping is one of the best jobs I've ever seen. You know, typically you see jobs like this, but they're a little more blurred and they're a little less defined, I should say. This truly looks like brick.
It does.
I mean, you really, if you didn't know that it wasn't, if you didn't see them do it, I mean, you'd think they're brick laying down there.
Yeah. And finally, I want to circle back to earlier in tonight's meeting, we had a public comment from Beth Bordeaux regarding the Western Wake Crisis Ministry request for $10,000. I did have a conversation with Ms. Bordeaux about this request. Apex has committed to $20,000. Holly Springs has committed to $10,000. The request of us is $10,000. They are asking for, I have asked, as has Holly Springs, that if the town board participates or agrees to participate, would there be assurances that they could provide to us that the funds that we contributed go directly to Fuquay-Varina residents, people who live in the town limits of Fuquay-Varina that qualify and have a true need related to COVID-19. They do have an accounting system that is in place that they can track by physical address, that they can provide those assurances to us. They've provided that assurance to Holly Springs, and they commit that they can provide that assurance to the town. I have also shared with you the advice provided by our legal counsel as it relates to the request, and as well as a recommendation. And so at this point, I just need guidance from the town board as to whether you do wish or you do not wish to participate in their request. It's $10,000.
Any discussion by the board?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Commissioner Wunsch.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, earlier today I'd written a letter to Town Manager Mitchell just with my thoughts on this, which I wanted to just share briefly with the board. It says, good afternoon, Adam. In consideration of your email from several days ago, my inclination would be to vote to not give Western Wake Ministries funds for COVID relief. The decision was arrived at by considering four important factors. First, as you mentioned in the email, there is no statutory authority to support a $10,000 contribution. Two, it opens the door for additional nonprofits to ask for town contributions following future calamities or complain that contributions weren't given. For example, the recent Angel Fund effort did not receive any funding from the town, and this money went to support Fuquay-Varina's small businesses. Three, the town would not have direct oversight over the distribution of these funds. And four, as you mentioned in your email, we do not know the full impact this virus could have on town revenue. My heart does certainly go out to all of our local families and businesses devastated by COVID, as my own personal business has experienced an effect from it. But I would not be in support of this for those reasons, and that was what I shared with the manager earlier today.
Any other thoughts about this?
I think there's a lot of different organizations to think about, but I think that it is it's tough to choose. Sometimes it is tough choosing different ones. I don't like the idea that we're choosing favorites. We're choosing different organizations that we can do certain things with. The Angel Fund was mentioned earlier, and my business did support the Angel Fund, and at the same time, the town of Fuquay-Varina did not necessarily fund it, but the Economic Development Commission, which is it's a nonprofit group, but it's an arm of the town, or at least most people associate it as part of the town at the same time, even though it is not necessarily the town of Fuquay-Varina. And that did support that in a fairly large amount, and continue to do loans with that. When we do have surrounding communities that are supporting organizations, and we have people from within our community asking us to support these organizations, it puts us back in the statement I made earlier of having to choose favorites, but it is tough to not support this organization necessarily because of what they're doing, and what Adam, you're saying is that they have shown to you that they can keep the funding so it goes toward Fuquay-Varina, correct?
They have Beth indicated that they have an accounting in place where they can give assurances to the town through reporting that the $10,000 that the town, if the town were to give $10,000, the $10,000 that the town would give did only go to Fuquay-Varina families that qualified or of being in need.
Well, have you heard anything from any other nonprofits in town, churches, for instance? Have any of them committed or had resolutions passed for this?
I believe there are some churches as well that have or are seriously thinking about committing to it.
Okay. Different. I lost train of thought for a second.
Well, I like the
Come back in
idea
a minute.
that they work closely with FACES too, with that group.
You triggered my thought.
Yeah,
Thank you, sir. Mayor, thank you for bringing it up. I don't mean to cut you off. Let me
that's all right.
my
Go
thought
right
right there. Was exactly what you did mention. They do work with other organizations within our town. And I know we have talked about paring back repetitive funding every year on organizations, and we talked about it last board meeting, and I was a fan of not automatic funding of every nonprofit organization every year. However, I did say at the time I would be in favor of when needs arrive and certain organizations arrive at different times of the year that maybe we would need to do things. And exactly what you just said there, Mayor, they do work with FACES, who, for instance, has been funded by the town in the past. I think it's a budget recommendation this year.
$1,500 this
For
year.
them also. And so this is a one-time ask, not a recurring ask, correct?
That's right. I think the differentiator between what Western Wake Ministry, Crisis Ministry is asking for versus some of the other partners we've worked with in the past is the differentiator here is COVID-19, and this would be a one-time contribution to support Fuquay-Varina families that are struggling due to the pandemic crisis.
Okay.
Any other comments or thoughts?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a couple of comments.
Yes, sir.
And this sort of is in line with the comments I made at one of the prior board meetings in relationship to, what I think our responsibility can be as far as building community and strengthening community here in Fuquay-Varina. I would just make this comment that I think that amid our growth, amid our expansion, that there has always been something unique about Fuquay-Varina, and that has been the strength of the volunteers and those people who have gone beyond their personal ambitions to improve the quality of life for the citizens here in Fuquay-Varina. And I think it's important for us as a statement to the community at large that we actually care about families, and we care about children, and we care about helping those who are least fortunate and who are our citizens. So I'm in support of providing some support at some level, I think it's important for us to look at and for me to maintain the soul of our community, because that has been the strength historically here in Fuquay-Varina for a long time. FACES has been one of those organizations that has exemplified that kind of commitment to helping one another and to helping the citizens here. So I support giving some assistance at some level, and I would confer with other board members or defer to some of the other board members as it relates to what amount we should give to support this effort.
Have we had any other
Thank
organizations?
you very much.
Any other organizations ask for money?
Commissioner, let's stay on this. Commissioner Gardner, let's hear from you.
In thinking about this, I understand that the difference here, I mean, we've had lots of catastrophes over the last, even just in the last few years, but this is on some kind of scale that we've not seen in my lifetime. I don't think it would be precedent setting to support this on some level. It is a I see it more as a regional thing where there are other government entities involved as well, and I think, as I understand it, this would be this would be something to coordinate with what FACES does, but extend. It's not to take over what FACES does. It's to extend that into more of a coalition in this Southern Wake area. So I think I feel it. I come down like Commissioner Harris, that on some level I would like to see us participate in this. I think it is different enough that we wouldn't be setting a precedent. I would feel comfortable defending it.
Thank you, Commissioner Gardner. Commissioner Smith, your thoughts with us?
It's one of those difficult decisions because we've just recently in our budget negotiations discussed, beginning to cut back on, assisting some of the nonprofits in our community, and all of them are worthy. I can't think of a single nonprofit that we've assisted that I think is unworthy of assistance. And I appreciate Commissioner Wunsch's pointing out, trying to be consistent in our decisions. My issue is I worry that if we reach out and help in a time of need, what about next week if another organization identifies another need that would be very legitimate? But then the other side that I look at, and it's hard, I know I'm not giving you much direction, Mr. Manager, I do look at this situation that we're talking about friends and neighbors who are in need, and many times the people we find in need in a situation like COVID-19 has presented are many of our service employees in the area, folks who work in our restaurant industry and our retail industry, who have all of a sudden, some of these folks aren't making the highest salaries in our community, for lack of a better way to put this, and now they find themselves making zero salary, and they find themselves backed into a corner, and this is our community. These are the folks that we serve, and this is the people that make up our community from one end of the financial spectrum to the other. And my heart goes out, and I look at other towns who are probably facing these. I bet they had similar discussions that we're having right now, trying to decide, do we do something like this? I'm inclined to help people because I think even though we didn't participate, I was very proud that the Angel Fund did so well. Of course, it was private funding, but we were still reaching out. Our people in our community did. I'm inclined to assist people because they are our neighbors, they are our friends, they are our community, people to make up our great community. But my only holdback is we could have an equal request next week for equally needed funding, and at some point we can't fund them all because our funding may be tight as the year goes by. But in light of the fact that two communities that we work closely with, Apex and Holly Springs, and in light of the fact that they can assure us that the monies we provide to this organization will be spent in our community on our community that's in need, I would probably be inclined to say let's try to support them if we can. Obviously, you have to identify funding for us, where to come from, but that's my thoughts. I know I've talked in circles, but you know, they're heart-pulling decisions. I mean, I worry about our citizens who are out of work right now and having trouble even buying groceries. That does bother me.
You know, quick thought. Adam, you want to rehash a little bit what these funds would be going for to these individuals that would be living in the city limits of Fuquay-Varina? I mean, I'm assuming that's what you're telling us. These are city funds.
That's right. And so it would either go towards helping citizens experiencing hardships with rent payments, with utility payments, and Western Wake Crisis Ministries also considering expanding that to child care payments.
And those are things that are very much needed now, and a lot of this load has been on faces, you know, in recent months or recent years. How about the leadership in this organization? Is there anybody on their board of directors from Fuquay-Varina? Or do we know
perhaps
that? Does anybody here in the room know anybody?
I've reviewed their information, their list of board of directors, so I've seen the names. I don't recognize any of the names, but that's not to say that you wouldn't recognize some of the names. But their website's very transparent.
It is. I looked at it.
It lists who their management staff is. It lists who their board of directors are. I'm just not certain.
Mr. Mayor,
I didn't see anybody from Fuquay-Varina that I knew. Commissioner Harris.
I think Ms. Bordeaux mentioned Harriet Wilson.
Harriet Wilson runs Faces. That's the other. Runs Faces.
Yes, Harriet Wilson is a member of First Baptist Church here in Fuquay-Varina, and I think she lives within the city limits here of Fuquay-Varina, and has been involved with Faces for a few years now.
About 5.
I think so, yeah, if I'm not mistaken.
What does this organization offer that Faces does not offer?
They do have a very similar mission. Our experience with funding Faces in years past has been primarily to go towards, not necessarily towards rent or child care, but so there's a little bit of an expansion there, and what their mission is as it specifically relates to the COVID-19 pandemic. But generally our past history with Faces and our contribution to support them has gone towards helping citizens in need with utility payments.
So I wonder, why would we not necessarily take one of our organizations that's within Fuquay-Varina and ask them to do, for instance, Faces, to do some of these things versus having to bring a whole new organization into the mix, an organization that's outside of Fuquay-Varina?
I think that's an option, but this group is partnering with the town of Apex and the town of Holly Springs, and offers a tremendous amount of expertise. And they are saying to us that they will partner with Faces.
That's correct.
Here. So it gives me some good feeling about it if we can make sure the people that will be in the city limits of Fuquay-Varina.
Is it important that this decision, so my last comment, because I'm really somewhat on the fence for some of the reasons that were stated earlier, and so the amount of money that's requested, I know you can find that in the budget. To me, this is not a conversation about the amount of money that's being requested as much as it's a policy decision that's being thought about with this. And I wonder if that's the case, so then the following 2 weeks from now, when the food pantry or another organization that has laid off workers or anybody comes and asks us for money, how does this board want to start treating those requests at that point? Are we going to have somebody new every week that we're then going to have the conversation about, or do we want to support? How do we pick and choose the winners, which goes back to the original Dog and Pony Show we used to do with funding nonprofits back in the day. And everyone has noble causes, and everybody's affected by coronavirus. And so to me, it's more about the policy than it is about the money. And I have not even read the Western Wake Crisis Ministry website today. As we mentioned earlier, I have not read it today or looked at that information today on it. I did look at it some last week when we spoke about it, but I mean, this is not gonna make a difference what's done today or done 2 weeks from now. So I almost wonder would it be better to let this board think individually, is this a new policy tone that you want to set? In 2 weeks, we make this decision and then be ready to start having multiple organizations come in front of this board right here and start being able to tell them all yes or no, or pick your winners and favorites.
And Adam, that would be my concern. You know, I'm thinking as this first as an attorney that there's no statutory authority to support this. That disturbs me. But beyond that, if we do this, as the Mayor Pro Tem said, it opens the door for additional nonprofits to ask for these contributions that 2 weeks from now, or let's say COVID resurges and then we have another group come and say, well, you know, you gave to this group and we're a Fuquay-Varina group and we're asking for $5,000 and so on and so forth. What precedent are we setting here today by doing this when we, and not to take away from the need and not to take away from the importance? That's my huge concern. Could evoke legal challenges as well with, as mentioned, not being statutory authority, and then all of a sudden you have multiple groups coming and asking for money and all being very worthwhile, extremely worthwhile in this very important cause. And so that's my big concern with going forward and setting that precedent today. We're saying, you know, if we agree to this, then, you know, we're saying that even maybe not, it doesn't even have to be another crisis, a tornado or what have you, but it could, or a hurricane. It could just be that COVID resurges, and we have to make that decision again. And so that's my big concern. Again, I want to reiterate to the public that my heart certainly goes out to all of our local families, and there've been amazing community support. Like the Mayor Pro Tem was saying, you know, the community's come together. They've given of themselves, probably a lot of times when they haven't had it, to help small businesses, and that's my concern when we get into that position of being asked to support something very worthwhile, you know, without the statutory authority, and where do we draw the line? So.
Mayor Pro Tem, you mentioned maybe putting it off a couple weeks. Do you want to make a motion to that effect?
Mr. Mayor, if I,
You still there?
he's there.
I am. I'm sorry. I was letting you finish your comment, or have you finished your okay.
Yes, sir.
Mayor, before I make that motion, I think the manager did have a comment, if you don't mind him saying that comment.
Please.
Now, I was just going to say that I recognize that this is a difficult and challenging decision for the board. If you were going to, it's certainly fine to wait 2 weeks. I don't, as you mentioned, Mayor Pro Tem, I don't see any harm that comes from that. I will say, if the board is asking for a recommendation from me as it pertains to policy, my recommendation is no different than my recommendation has been in the past when it comes to these matters, and what it was when we began to talk about our contributions to organizations in the past. On policy, my recommendation is to not support these things, because for the very reasons that you've brought up, the precedent it sets, how you pick and choose, the statutory authority being a big one that our legal counsel has advised us of. And so if you're asking for a recommendation on policy, my recommendation would be not to support it. If you're asking my recommendation based on some of the very other comments that I heard tonight by some of the board members regarding the soul of our community and supporting those that are in need and working as a part of a coalition with other Southern Wake County municipalities, I would say that there's some sense in that to me as well. So it's a hard decision. I recognize that, and I just want to share it. If it comes down to not money, but it comes down to policy, my professional recommendation to you would be to not meet the request.
Mayor, I'm ready to make a motion.
Go ahead.
In regards to this, I'm not looking to change policy, but for a one-off occurrence and for what's being described, and I understand that I'm very likely, if this motion passes, open opportunity that somebody else at the next meeting may be coming up also, but with what's going on out there right now, I'm gonna have a tough time looking people in the eye when the story gets out that town of Fuquay-Varina does not support trying to help its residents. And here's somebody, that's the first proposal that's came in front of us here to support the residents of Fuquay-Varina, so therefore I make a motion to approve.
So your motion is to not put it off, but to approve the request of $10,000?
Correct.
Okay. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that motion, Mr. Mayor, along with the comment.
Okay. Commissioner Harris.
My comment will be a couple of things. I understand the issue of setting the precedent, and I understand some of the concerns, but I don't think that we open the floodgates for people to come and line up to ask a municipality or us for money like it might have been insinuated. I just don't see that happening, because historically, most of the organizations who have come to this body and have had long history here in Fuquay-Varina, and some of them have a track record of doing good things and being fiscally responsible for what the funds are that they receive. So the fear of thinking that we're setting a precedent and that people will be lining up asking for money, and it's going to put us in a situation wherein we will have to feel obligated for every request, I don't think that that's necessarily going to happen that way. And I hope that any member who votes to support this will sort of eliminate that idea that this is going to set a dangerous precedent, because I just think that this situation is a unique situation. I think that historically, when you look at and you look at the wealth of the commitment of people who are involved in these organizations to do good, I just don't think we're going to have that kind of situation where people will line up and will be put in an unfavorable position.
Yes, you willing to make a second?
I've already seconded, and then I made those comments, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Mr. Mayor, I would just add, if, is there a way to frame this so that we're not opening up the floodgates, that this is a one-time type of thing to help the community, but that, the town of Fuquay is not in the business of, giving money every time there is a request, given either this pandemic or something in the future.
And I think one other thing that makes this a little different is our neighboring communities working together with our neighboring communities. I think what Adam has said is that's significant, makes it significantly different than any request that we've had necessarily in the past. And if we've got a way of making sure that the funds are spent within the city limits and work closely with FACES, then I think we're on the right track. Any other discussion?
I think those two things. I think the fact that we would be working in coalition with other communities, and the fact that this is unprecedented. And I mean, when was the last time something like this struck our state and our country? I mean, they talk about a flu back in 1917 or whatever it was.
Spanish flu.
Well, I think that means that this has our attention. This is not your just. It's just not your average critical need. It is a pandemic.
And it doesn't mean that any of the rest of us couldn't give some money to this organization. I think that a lot of times you know, we need to really look at and support the things that we believe in. Okay, we've got a motion and a second. No more discussion. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, just a few other items that are on other business, Mr. Mayor, on the agenda tonight. You do have a quarterly report and a financial quarterly report for your viewing. The quarterly report, it's item 11B, is trends and statistics as it relates to many of our departments, many of our development services departments, as well as Parks and Recreation, Arts Center, and some of our other departments that we keep metrics on. Everything's looking pretty good with regards to our individual departments, and but a lot of this data was through March of 2020, and so it does not take into account the significant impacts in the month of April that COVID-19 has brought. Our fourth quarter report will begin to truly see some of the impacts related to COVID-19. Our financial quarterly report is the same. What we would expect through 3 quarters is to have at least 75% of our revenue projections coming in and no more than 75% of our expenditures. And again, this is primarily pre-COVID-19 impacts, and so everything's looking fairly strong from a budgeting standpoint with our financial position. Again, when we present this to you in July for data through June 30th, we'll have a better indication of the quarterly impacts that COVID-19 has had on our community. We're monitoring that daily. Our finance department is monitoring it very closely, but this financial report only goes through March of 2020, so it really doesn't demonstrate the full impact of COVID-19. You have several first readings in your agenda packet, items 11D through items 11J. What does that mean? That means that the planning board heard these items last night. I think that the planning board passed all of these along with a recommendation to the town board. So all of these will appear as public hearings on the June 1st agenda, as well as the recommended fiscal year 21 budget and 5-year plan. So to the extent that you can review these and familiarize yourself with these and ask any questions that you might have in advance of the June 1st meeting, it will help that meeting move along in a more expeditious manner. So I typically don't make that disclaimer to you about first readings. I know you all look at them ahead of time anyway, but it's very important that if we're not going to be posting up in sleeping bags and cooking breakfast with one another the next morning, that you familiarize yourself with these items so that we can move through this June 1st meeting within a fair, reasonable amount of time. With that said, Mayor, I've got nothing else to report to the board under other business or manager's report this evening. I'm happy to answer any questions that the board has.
Call on Mayor Pro Tem Massengill at this time for his words of wisdom.
You said we got a big closed session?
We do have a closed session with several items under attorney-client privilege and the economic development statute.
Big agenda, no further business, Mayor.
Commissioner Smith.
Surprisingly, I have no comments tonight, Mr. Mayor.
Commissioner Harris.
No comment, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Commissioner Wunsch.
No comment, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Commissioner Gardner.
I just have one quick thing, and that is to say the things that some of the things that have impressed me most throughout our society and our town in these times is how you adapt to be able to do some of the things that we normally do, and many of them we're just not doing. But the Fuquay-Varina downtown managed to pull off on plein air this weekend with they just figured out a way to do it because it was nothing like we've ever done before. And they had, the paintings came in on Sunday, and they invited the sponsors who sponsored the artist to come. They lined them up on that little ledge on the outside of the Arts Center. and had a couple of hours when the sponsors could come by and social distance and see them. And they're amazing. And there's going to be, hopefully, an online auction July 18th to sell these paintings. And my hat is off to the Arts Center and to Downtown Revitalization for being able to pull this event off. And those artists were so excited to be painting. They said, I didn't see any of the artists, but anyway, be looking for those on July the 18th. You might want one. We had the amazing one of the old library that we have in the board chamber here. There's one of the new library that will take your breath. It's just some really great things. So some of them were not right downtown. They gave them a lot more leeway in the suggestions they made that they could choose from. So it was exciting, and I'm really proud that they figured out a way to do it. One of our really premier events here in town. Thank you.
And I would echo, what Commissioner Gardner said. I mean, what they did, they gave people time slots of 15 minutes that were sponsors. I think it kind of allowed to have a small group of people there. It took a period of time for them to do it Sunday evening, but it was very nicely done, and social distancing was observed. But I was thoroughly impressed with what I saw, and I appreciate Dawn and Rachel and Maureen and Jennifer working together and doing an outstanding job once again. A couple of the areas that I'll mention since the last meeting, we had many of us went out with Susan Payne and received with Chief Fonstock, received the robot. What do we call that? Do we ever name it, Adam?
Not sure if we've named it or not, to be honest.
We're gonna name it something. I know that Chief Fonstock was working on that, but it's kind of impressive that it's done right here in Fuquay-Varina, and it's an item probably in the $20,000 cost range that was given to our police department. And I could see so many different ways that it will help us and very easily save lives. Wake County Mayors Association was last night, and we were all on the communicating, which was really an interesting conversation. It was kind of talking about budgets and you have to look at each municipality a little bit like Adam has said. Some are very similar to us and some are very different. Wake Forest this year has taken over their fire department up there. I mean, it's about a $3 million, $2.5 million add-on. The town of Fuquay-Varina did that close to 20 years ago, a little over 20 years ago. And other areas in Wake County are starting to look toward different types of partnerships on doing things. And, as I think about this latest funding, Adam and I have been talking about partnerships and working closely with our neighbors the best we can. We need to know kind of what they're doing, and they need to know sort of what we're doing. And I think it's all really good. Tomorrow I have a Centennial Authority meeting and a Campo meeting that are both on, what do we call it? Google, not Google, but starts with a G, I think.
Well, they have WebEx and Google Meet.
No, it's the other one that's pretty easy to do. I like it.
We'll figure it out.
We've used it before.
I'm not sure which one it is.
But we'll figure it out. And, just, in closing.
Go-to meeting?
Maybe that's what it is, yeah. But kind of in finishing up, I just appreciate all of y'all. The team that we have here and the staff that we have done such an outstanding job. It wasn't long ago we were struggling with doing this virtual meeting. Now I feel like we're almost experts, at it. And, we're trying our best to do a good job for our community and our town, and we want to do the very best job that we can. And I appreciate each commissioner that's here and how they've contributed in so many different ways to our community. Okay, I will entertain a motion to go into closed session.
Pursuant to General Statute 143, 318A, 318.11A3, attorney-client privilege, and A4, economic development.
So moved.
Moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Anybody need a break or anything?
5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay.
just need to switch
Take
things.
about a 5-minute break.
Yes, sir.
I don't know, depends on how long his closed session.